It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is What Made the Cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Trajan Wealth brings you this portion of the show. TRAJANwealth.com for all your trusted local needs in retirement. It is TrajanWealth.com. It's time for us to have a conversation. We started off the show with the conversation of the big news out of BYU, which was they've gotten it down. I mean, it's almost like we're doing the Pope smoke coming out of the chimney down there. It's like when they choose a quarterback.
There is a starter.
But
we have a guy.
But even just whittling it down to 2 has gotten us as excited as anything else on there. I know that we're trying to get our BYU insider Mitch Harper on the horn. Are we close to there? Are we? Yeah, we're getting close. All right. I just didn't know if he was already.
High
sitting
demand
there
for Mitch today.
Well, I just didn't know if
he's doing national radio interviews across the country.
Oh, look,
because everybody around the country is dying to know the latest.
Well, the biggest one is that obviously, and we were able to kind of crack a little bit of some of the hints that were dropped from over the weekend from Aaron Roderick.
We had a full KSL Sports investigation.
We did, and that revealed that Bear Bachmeier and McCae Hillstead are your 2 quarterbacks right now vying for it. Eliminated was from the running of starting quarterback was Trayson Bourget, and part of that was because they said, "Hey, look, it's going to be." A-Rod said, he goes, "Look, we're going to have 2 quarterbacks who run the football," and we kind of went, "Oh, hold on a minute." And that's not to say that Trayson Bourget was not somebody who could run the football, but I think that when we talk about strengths that people have, that's part of what McCae Hillstead can do. We obviously know that Bear Bachmeier is one of the most athletic guys. I mean, how many times did A-Rod bring it up when they first talked about the Bachmeier brothers coming in when they first signed him? He was like, the amount of athleticism that these guys have is crazy. And so that popped, and so that's why we kind of made that estimation, and it turned out today. I even said, I go, wait till tomorrow when they do these media interviews, and I think you're going to find out what those 2 are. And indeed we did today. Mitch Harper, our BYU insider for KSLSports.com, joins us on the program. Mitch, did it surprise you to hear those 2 names as this was rolled out today by A-Rod?
No, it didn't surprise me. I even brought that up yesterday here on the zone with Scotty and McCae Hillstead and Bear Bachmeier, the names to watch. And so it didn't surprise me that Aaron Roderick said as much today, because I do think that those are the 2 best quarterbacks that BYU has. Going into this battle, those were the 2 guys that you look at to maybe the best chance to go to Arlington because of their skill set. And, just they kind of embody what Aaron Roderick usually turns to at the quarterback position since he's been the OC at BYU. But, Bear Bachmeier, I will say, I thought today was the best performance in a media window. Again, only the 4th media window that we've had since camp began on July 31st. But I thought it was the best individual performance from a quarterback so far in camp. And, McCae Hillstead, through most of camp, we've only seen him with the second-team offense primarily throughout camp, other than one day, which was last Tuesday, and I thought he looked exceptional with the first-team offense. So when McCae's been with the first-team offense, he's looked good. Bear Bachmeier today, he's shown a lot of progress from his day one, where he was, surprising performance for a true freshman, and then today he had some really good throws, one in particular to Carson Ryan that was in a tight window, and he got it over the top and got it on the money to Carson. And then he also had a throw on the right, running to his right, over the middle to JoJo Phillips. It was a really good ball. That would have been a chain mover. So some really good things from Bear Bachmeier. But I will say that one thing in particular that did catch my attention from Bear in his in the portion where he was running the first-team offense against the first-team defense, the drive did stall in the red zone. L.J. Martin had a nice run inside the red zone, got BYU down to about the 10 or 9-yard line, but then it stalled out. So they didn't finish the drive with a touchdown. And look, it might be splitting hairs, but when you're going into a quarterback debate and you're trying to find anything to turn to with a true freshman, you got to finish those opportunities when they're in front of you. So that was maybe the one downside to Bear, but I thought it was a really productive day for the true freshman.
Well, I'll tell you what it does to a quarterback when you tell him, A, you're going to get we like what you're doing, we're going to give you starter reps, and then B, let him go out there and play with the ones. You have the confidence that they're going to give you those starter reps, and then you're playing with the guys that are the best, that are going to make plays and make you look good. Your play is going to elevate, and it's great that you saw that with Bear today for his sake. What has Bear done? Because Mitch, he didn't have spring with BYU. The other guys did. This is a true freshman that should have been way behind in understanding the playbook, understanding what's going on down there. How has he been able to not only close the gap, but perhaps put himself in a position to win this job?
His comfort and knowledge of the offense, and he's referenced his time at Stanford really getting him as being critical and getting acclimated to the speed of college football, that he went through spring where he was contending to be in the mix for that starting quarterback job at Stanford, and then he leaves after Troy Taylor gets dismissed and lands at BYU. But that was acclimation, but he's just looked calm, poised, and really collected. He's done a nice job. It doesn't seem like he's getting sped up much. And look, he's not going to be getting hit. So that's, maybe you can have that feel and kind of mindset when you're in this setting in a practice where you're not going to be taking any shots. But he doesn't look like he's getting rushed at all, and that he looks pretty dang comfortable in the offense. And even Aaron Roderick has said as much since week 1 that he's up to speed with this offense. And Roderick's even noted how impressed he's been with how much he's learned of this offense as a true freshman. So I think that that's the biggest thing. And I always kind of go back to, with Jaron Hall, when, he was kind of telling me before fall camp when I had a conversation with him, it's like it comes down to knowing the playbook. A-Rod, from his experience in his 3-man battle, they laid out no set standards of what you need to do to win this job. It was simply, you got to know the playbook and take care of the football. And Bear Bachmeier, outside of the one interception that we saw on day 3, he has taken care of that football. And even going back then, when I asked A-Rod about that interception on day 3, A-Rod almost chalked it up to it was caused by the staff, how they told him to kind of stay more in the pocket. Otherwise, that would have been a play that he probably runs out of the pocket and escapes. So I think it's been, where he's looked the part, and he's done a nice job. And also it's just, he comes in with where Aaron Roderick and this staff really viewed him in high regard. I mean, he was identified early in the recruiting process when he was a high school recruit as a 10th grader. He visited BYU camp. This staff has been high on him for really a handful of years now, and they feel like he's, so far doing a nice job to warrant being opportunity with first-team reps, a majority of the first-team reps today at camp.
Mitch, we chatted last hour with John Wilner, and he shared his top 25 AP preseason poll, and he put Texas Tech at 11, the highest-ranked Big 12 team. That was quite high, we thought. But also, you see why. We know that there could be teams like TCU, like Texas Tech, that could maybe surprise some people. Baylor's in that mix as well. Utah's now in that conversation. We asked him about what his post-spring vote was versus what it is now for BYU, and he said they were between 12 and 15 in his post-spring rankings, and then with the Jake Retzlaff news, he took them all the way out. What's your estimation as to what BYU is going to get with a guy like Bear Bachmeier or like McCae Hillstead? Can they still be in that conversation about being a ranked team, or do you think that those question marks at quarterback are just too much and it might have to be something that they wait on for a while before you actually see what this team's talent level really is?
They can definitely be a ranked team because I think whoever takes over the job on week 1, they're going to look really good. And I think, honestly, in non-conference play, they're going to look really good. I think you're going to be 3-0. I think East Carolina could be tricky. That's an 8-4 football team that really turned the corner when they turned to the interim coach, and that interim coach is now the head man, and they've got a returning quarterback, and they've got some really legit speed out of the portal at wide receiver. That won't be an easy game, but I think BYU should be 3-0. So that right there puts you in a position where you're ranked, and then everything's in front of you with the Big 12, and I think even though the Big 12 doesn't get the same leniency like the SEC and Big 10, you still will get a little bit of wiggle room, like, a road loss at, say, Colorado, it won't sink you, and especially with last year being an 11-2 team. And so I think BYU's got the chance to be ranked. I just think that, if you do go with the true freshman, say someone like Bear Bachmeier, you're going to have some days where the offense is probably just stuck in the mud completely. But it'll be some great days too. And I think the same could be said for McCae Hillstead, but I think we've just got a little bit more sample size with him because he has played D1 football at Utah State, where I thought he made the most of his opportunity and had some really big-time performances, particularly against James Madison. So, and he's got better talent around him at BYU if he gets the call to be QB1. So I think the floor with these guys is probably, 7-5. I think maybe a little bit lower potentially with Bear just because the true freshman piece is just, it can be scary. Like there's times like when Zach Wilson was the true freshman, he goes off for 49 points against Hawaii. Then the next week it's 3 points, whatever it was against Northern Illinois. So you can have a wide range of outcomes week to week with a true freshman, whereas I think someone that's got a little bit more experience could maybe give you a little bit higher floor. But I will say the talent of this BYU football team is in a much better place. Like you just look at the second and third team players and got some of the guys that are competing. When I dive into my notes from today, you're seeing a guy like a Kini Laufona-Hema showing up with some second team snaps, third team defensive end. He's a former Springville High standout, guy that was really thin last year, but physically very long. I mean, he's got long arms, big hands, and they're adding weight to him, and maybe he could be someone off the edge. That's just where you're seeing, people that have been seeing this every single day and following it for years. Like that's an uptick in talent that BYU hasn't had at that level of the roster in really ever. And so that's an intriguing athlete when you like the numbers and the depth that BYU has if they have some injuries to turn to. But still, it's just that quarterback position. You want to have just clarity going into a season of week after week what you're going to get from that spot. But I think the saving grace is that, Jake Retzloff was, when he was the QB1, that wasn't always the case either. They still went 11-2. So this team can win low-scoring games if they need to, if the offense has a day or two where they're struggling and they're not performing to their fullest ability.
Do you think A-Rod's going to be more conservative, especially early on in the season, with whether it's Bachmeier or Hillstead? You're going with a quarterback that's relatively inexperienced. Does he look to be more conservative, more run-heavy because of that?
I would expect so because, L.J. Martin has looked really good in camp. And, he's shed a little bit of weight, looks like, from what he was last year. And last year that was a big focal point of adding 20 pounds. And he came in with the shoulder injury, and then he got banged up in week 2 with the ankle. I think L.J. Martin, you got to keep him healthy at all costs, but he's due for a big year, and I think it's kind of the makings of what Jamal Williams was in 2016, where when Jamal got to about 25 carries, you knew BYU was going to win games, but those games where Jamal was far less than 25, they'd probably lose. I think he needs a big workload. L.J. Martin does this year, and then work in Sione Moa too, maybe in Enoch Nawahine or Javesa Demooney, some of those guys as well when you dig into the depth at running back. But L.J. Martin's got to be relied upon early and often in games. And, look, he's been the leading rusher for BYU the last 2 years, and I'd expect nothing less if he stays healthy this season.
Mitch Harper, BYU Insider, KSLSports.com is where you can see his byline and get the best updates on BYU side of things. So as you get a little bit closer to the season, you start to kind of figure out what these guys are doing and when is the reality. I know that they were both asked about, well, when would the possibility of a day one starter be named. I know they've been kind of sheepish on that, but is the reality is it's going to be before the Portland State game, or do you think they give the Portland State, or do you think it's going to be like the day of type of a deal, or what's A-Rod's move typically in something like this?
Well, last year it was obviously waiting till game day. I think what you could do this year is you could name it early, just because there's still no film on McCae Hillstead or Bear Bachmeier as BYU guys at all still, even if you named them. There's still this element of mystery with that. Whereas last year, if you named Jake Retzloff the starter in advance, then you really dive deep into those 4 games for if you're an opponent to really sum up what Retzloff's strengths and weaknesses were. And then you had a big sample size with Gary Bohannon as well from his time at USF and Baylor as well. So that's where there's still, you can say Bear Bachmeier, 7 days before if you're BYU. still doesn't change the fact that it's going to be mysterious to Portland State and Stanford. You'll know a little bit more than most. But still, even McCae Hillstead, if you named him, like you're just not going to know how BYU is going to utilize him. So I think that's where even naming a quarterback earlier than game day, there's still that element of surprise of really what they're going to look like at BYU in the Aaron Roderick offense.
Did A-Rod give any hint or indication when the next step might be in this battle, when a decision may finally be made?
He did not. They are going to take a break tomorrow. They're up in the Heber Valley right now. They're on a team retreat camp. They'll resume practice on Thursday and then kind of close out the week with 3 practices, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But, no timeline as far as that. Kalani did say today that, they'd like to have camp closed out 2 weeks before Portland State. So, that's around the 16th would be the 2-week mark for camp, and that's this Saturday. So, I would imagine that things are getting closer to moving in the direction to really establish who that QB1 is and make it clear who's going to be the guy leading BYU into the season.
All this talk about the offense. How's the defense performing at camp right now, Mitch?
I thought the defense performed well. I mean, obviously they allowed Bachmeier to have a few nice highlight plays, and it was the first-team defense. You saw the Jack Kellys and Isaiah Glaskers, different personnel at cornerback. We did see Evan Johnson and Jaden Dunlap at corner instead of Maury Bamba and Evan Johnson, or excuse me, Trey Alexander, rather. It's going to be a cornerback by committee this year. Even General Guilford told me that today. Maury Bamba is the leader of the group, but that's of note when you're factoring in, these receptions and who the personnel is that's defending. But I thought the defense as a whole has been performing at a high level, despite, some of the lack of depth maybe at defensive tackle with Justin Kirkland still being absent. You're still seeing Keanu Tanavasa, JT, and it's those top 2 D tackles. But then there's some young guys like Ulavai Fetuli, Kalepi Latufinau, true freshmen that are kind of, making a little bit of waves in camp in the interior of the defensive line. Still, you want to have, guys like Justin Kirkland in that mix in the interior. But I think for the most part, BYU's defense is really good this year, and particularly, too, at linebacker, but also safety. Today we saw Raider DeMooney and Tanner Wall with the first-team defense, but Tommy Parasis and Falatau Satuala had some excellent hits, and you still got veteran Talon Alfrey, who's the veteran of this program, been around the team since 2018. So BYU is in a really good place defensively. Again, if you can get some clear answers and some consistency and stay healthy at quarterback, it's got the chance, like Kalani would say, to be a pretty good football team.
Mitch Harper, he's our BYU insider for KSLSports.com. He does a phenomenal job, better than anybody in the market. Mitch, thanks for hanging out with us, man. We'll dip in with you again when anything breaks, and thanks for the updates from camp, man.
You bet. Take care, guys.
There you go.
Thanks,
Mitch Harper, everybody.